So I recently came across this book called The Stack, right? This book is a book that's arguing that our adoption of these social platforms, of social media, as our way of communication, as our way of interfacing with each other, is just as significant as like navigation. It's just as much of a global game changer as that. And it honestly, I haven't read the book yet, by the way. I really want to. It could be, I think, an interesting book to discuss here even. But I think just the premise alone has really gotten me thinking about the way that I look at social media and the internet as a whole, of like, you know, especially talking to any older person in my life, the thing they say is that like everything's gotten so much worse. And throughout the course of this series, we've discussed this so much, right? We've discussed different interpretations of this. We've discussed the idea that social media has nothing to do with why we think everything's so much worse right now. But I want to ignore all that for a second. I just want to give a ton of credence to this one idea that I hear so often from all the older people in my life, that things were way better before, that just everything was better before social media, and that this has led to a terrible thing, right? This has led to everything bad. I want to just lump the internet in here too, because I think like looking at the time that we had the internet versus social media, it's a pretty slim window, right? I kind of just want to group these two together because I think that even if we didn't have social media, something like it would arise from the internet, right? I don't want to talk about just social media as a concept because I think that's a little bit of a tired conversation. I want to talk about just in general, the idea of having a technology that connects everyone and everything and allows it to happen all at once. That's what I want to talk about. Call it the internet, call it social media. I think it's that concept that has more interest than anything else, right? Because maybe it's too far. Like, there's this idea that often comes up that is always being spoken about from generation to generation, right? I just alluded to it with all the older people in my life, but I think if you go back to any time, there'll always be a group of people being like, we've gone too far with this technology stuff. And I think it's important to say right off the bat that the people who stand in the way of progress historically lose. Like there is, if I were, you know, as much as I'm giving credence to this discussion right now, and I think it's a really interesting topic, one that I am even super empathetic to, I think like if I had $1 million and I had to bet on where we're going, things are only gonna get more connected, things are only gonna get more technologically advanced. The internet and social media is only going to get bigger unless there's some like giant, you know, like cyber war or something. Like, as if things continue on the general path they are right now, as if there's no giant disruption, you gotta bet on progress to happen, right? I think that's the coldest take you could ever have. You know, during the Enlightenment, people were going, this Enlightenment stuff's too far, we're going too far. And look at where we are now, you know? If when the next enlightenment happens, when we get even better, when we get even smarter as a species, maybe we're in the middle of right now. I think that's an interesting topic. If that happens, there's going to be a ton of people going, no, that's too far. I mean, look at AI. There is a huge population of people that think like we should just not do AI. I'm in that population. I think that, I don't know. I go back and forth on it sometimes, to be honest. But, you know, I think it should be said that there's always going to be people who are against progress, and that they're usually going to be on the losing team, right? Maybe that's because there's more money in progress. I don't know. I think there's like a part of me as just like somebody who's maybe a little too dramatic when looking at this stuff that wants to believe there's like something that's almost mystical about the human spirit that makes it so progress is like almost an inevitability. But that suggests that progress is always going to be a good thing. And as much as progress is certainly going to happen, I believe it's inevitable, maybe not because of technology, maybe not because of the human spirit rather, but because of something else. I will not say it's not always a good thing. I mean, look at the look at nukes. Like, I don't like that one. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody's going like, man, what a good invention. But progress is certainly always going to happen. I think that, you know, you're going to be on the losing team if you're against it. So, when speaking about this idea that the internet was just too far, what is the credence there? I think the credence probably has to do with the idea that we've progressed too much for our own maturity, right? That the human brain was really just made to be like let's go gather food, let's exist in our smaller space, let's exist in a community, let's do these more simple things, let's have a family, XYZ, let's like reproduce or however that whole thing goes, I think as a neuroscientist, as not a neuroscientist, crazy mess up right there, guys. As somebody that has no idea how the brain works or any of that stuff, this is like the most common theory here. This is the theory where if like you go into the nearest bar and ask the guy next to you, like, what do you think about this whole internet thing? He'll be like, we were meant to hunt. We weren't meant to do this. So, that's interesting, right? I don't think it's interesting as a theory. I think it's actually really simple as a theory. I actually almost would say it's reductive as a theory, but I do think that's interesting how many people think that. And I wonder if the reason that so many people think this is because there's a giant population of people that use these things every day and are like, God, it seems so much better when this wasn't around. And this is their explanation. That like, rather than, I don't know, I feel like this is actually a really pessimistic way of looking at this. I don't love what I'm about to say by any means, but I feel like there's an angle here which, rather than this line of reasoning coming out of any sort of genuine, like, interest in science or any sort of genuine interest in the truth, it comes out of more of an emotional, like, I don't like how this thing makes me feel, so I'm going to assume this wasn't meant to happen. I think it's almost a similar argument to being like, cigarettes weren't meant to happen because I feel terrible after I smoke one. Like, there's a similar way in which these two things emerge. And even this idea that implies X wasn't meant to happen, that's a loaded statement there, right? Wasn't meant to happen by whose rules? By by what force is this not meant to happen? By the force of our own brain? I think there's almost a way in which this infers like there's some sort of ground rules to how the world has to work. And I mean, I just don't think that's true, especially because I think, and this is why I think that book, or the premise of that book, The Stack, got me so interested in this whole topic, is because it truly places the internet into a historical context of not like, the internet's new. The internet's something that's never happened before. It's crazy. It's an insane thing. But we've had giant sweeping changes like this before, right? And I think putting it in that context makes me think about this whole thing very differently. Because like, the idea that X wasn't meant to happen infers that there's an endpoint. There's a limitation like what we can handle. And that we've surpassed this limitation. It's a really dangerous thing we're playing with. Almost like we're playing God with ourselves right now. And I think like, things seem like they shouldn't be happening until they're happening. And as much as I definitely have my qualms with the internet itself, and I think that maybe this global connectivity needs to be managed in a better way, I am wary of being like, this shouldn't happen, because it's happening in like, as much as it's crazy sometimes, it's fine. Like, we're all alive, we're all doing well. There's great pros that have come from it. I mean, like, how many things have I learned off the internet? Even there's an argument made, you're watching this right now, I'm connecting with people through the internet. I'm able to record something in my room, just send it out there, and some people like it, some people don't. That's an amazing fact in itself. So to be like, this wasn't meant to happen, kind of a loaded statement. I think it's a really tricky subject, and a subject that is a surprisingly common take, that progress is not an overarching battle, but rather a destination. Like, to go, this should never happen, once again, infers that there is a limitation to what we can handle. Let's just throw out there, for argument's sake here, that like 1990 was the perfect point of progress. We had some phones, we had fax machines, we had printers, we had enough to be really good, and we were all still very happy. We didn't have this crazy, internet the way it is now. I know the internet was still around back then, but let's pretend that like the internet stayed right there forever, that we were connected enough for business and for things like that, but we weren't connected enough to do all this, right? That's a really weird idea, because does that mean that like we should have just been frozen there and like that was good? Like that was good, everything else bad, and that was where it was supposed to end? That's weird, right? The idea that there's an inferred end to progress means that there is a perfect point in which things weren't bad and were the right amount of good for progress to be like done, right? And that doesn't, like, I feel like that's a very, I don't know, saying the word ahistorical makes it sound like I know anything about history, which I'm not too informed on, to be honest, but I feel like that is almost an ahistorical argument, because look at the way history worked. Progress certainly has never slowed down before. Why would there be an endpoint? But also, inherently, there sort of needs to be an endpoint to progress, right? Because we do live in a finite world. Is the endpoint to progress what we can imagine? Is there some barrier that we'll only imagine towards? Is it the resources that exist on this planet, right? I think if there is a barrier to progress, if there is an endpoint to progress, if this possibility is true, that progress is not an overarching battle towards the next best thing, but rather a destination, I think it's a very strange idea that that destination was like we just hit it and we were like, let's keep going. Like, let's say again, 1990 was that perfect year, or like, let's go back to like 82, right? I don't know when the internet was made, but let's go the year before the internet was made. Let's say that was the perfect year for progress. I'm just gonna throw out 1982. I don't know if that's accurate, right? If that's true, then that means that like we hit the perfect point and we should have stopped based on it not feeling good to continue, based on there being some downsides to continuing. Why would we stop? Like, I understand endpoints to progress in terms of like our means, right? Like, maybe we hit an endpoint to progress because we can't access like time travel or something. Like, time travel is impossible. That's the endpoint. We can get right butt up to time travel, and then like genuinely just like physics or however that works will not allow us to keep going. How would, like, that makes sense because that's a literal physical limitation. The idea that the endpoint to progress is just like the year 1982 because everyone was real happy makes no sense to me. I think the other side to this that is maybe a little bit less concrete to speak about, and maybe is an annoying topic in its own right, but progress, we have this association that progress is going to be a good thing, right? When it's not always a good thing. We alluded to this earlier with the idea of a nuclear bomb, right? Nobody likes that thing. We all would get rid of that, I think, if we could. But maybe progress is more just like a thing that's going to keep happening. And maybe some of these things just aren't good. Like, maybe progress is not a good or a bad thing. It's just a force that will go and takes whatever form it ends up taking. The other idea too that I kind of think is interesting here is like, if I go out and I burn down a forest to build a factory, and in that factory I manufacture robots, that would be seen as progress to the vast majority of people, right? Let's say I send those robots out to like go and just like be bad. Like they're kicking over old people on the road. They're causing terror. They're going in every bathroom. They're flipping the toilet paper to be the other way around. These are just like pestering, annoying, sometimes violent robots that I made by burning down this forest in the woods. Nobody would argue things are better, right? But let's say I made some money while doing it. Let's say I'm hailed as a captain of industry, a genius for building these robots, because everybody's going, as much as these robots are kicking over old people on the road, this guy made some robots, and that's pretty impressive that these robots can do all that. This is not too dissimilar from the way that some technology works, right? Obviously, this is a comical, cartoonish example, right? But there are technologies around us that we use that have a marginal improvement. Let's say these robots I built, as much as they kick over old people, they hold the door for everybody too. And everybody's like, these guys are nice. As much as I feel bad for that old person I just watched get kicked over there, these guys are nice robots. This is not too dissimilar from technologies we have in the world around us today. These are seen as progress, but I don't think anybody would say that they've made the world better. I think the best argument you can make is that this was a net neutral at best, right? So this begs the question, what is progress? If progress is the best thing for the most amount of people, the internet would probably be defined as progress because it's able to spread information to people that would never be able to get it before. It's able to provide autonomy to people that never have it, able to provide friends and things like that, and I think the good outweighs the bad. So I guess the internet is progress, and I guess it was meant to happen. But I do think it's an interesting idea that all of us have, that there was a point in which things were perfect that we've passed. And I think maybe that suggests that there is not some sort of limiter in our minds to comprehending technology before us, but rather there's a limitation in our minds to imagine a world vastly different from the one surrounding us. That's my theory. Not theory. I don't have a theory. I'm not smart enough for theories. That's my conclusion of this episode of Paint and Talk. This is the painting. Again, probably my favorite of this series so far. I think I'm growing on these colors, guys. Tomorrow's the last one. We'll be moving on to a new color palette after that. I don't mind this, though. I don't mind this at all. I actually like this one a little bit more than the rest of them. So yeah, go follow the Instagrams. They'll be up over there. And until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Dice. This has been Paint and Talk episode 182. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all.